Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This week on Careers in Discovery, we're with Marco Schmidt, the Chief Scientific Officer of biotx.ai. We talked about the evolution of AI in science, the rise of tech bio, and why Marco believes this is the best time in history to be a scientist.
Welcome back to Careers in Discovery. This week, I'm joined by Marco Schmidt, Chief Scientific Officer from Biotech.ai. Welcome, Marco.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. I suppose a great place to start is to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at the moment.
Okay. Thank you for your question. So I'm one of the co-founders and now Chief Scientific Officer of Biotech.ai. So we are, I would like to call it a tech bio company. So our focus is actually on causal inference. So causal inference, these are statistical methods where you can confirm causality out of retrospective data. And we mostly work for biotech and pharma companies in cooperation with service CROs to give you a better, actually to predict a clinical trial. So a clinical trial, a randomized or prospective clinical trial is the gold standard to confirm causality. But it's very expensive, it's very long term. And now with these causal inference tools, we normally use biobank data. We try to simulate the trial beforehand that you get a lot of information. So what are the best patients? What is the best indication? Does the target really work in your patient? What kind of outcome you should choose? And this kind of information we can provide to especially biotech companies to make the clinical trials more successful.
Yeah. We've seen AI transform incredibly over the last 2 or 3 years. Do you have any predictions of how AI will be able to support, say, in 5 years' time? What sort of impact do you think it'll be making by then?
I see a lot of hope, but to be honest, I'm a little bit more realistic. For example, when I look at ChatGPT, for example, so they're using all the available data, but you now see what it's called the hub-spoke effect. I don't know whether you heard about this.
I haven't, no.
So hub-spoke, the hub-spoke family, they had a kind of degeneration because they just married within the family.
Right.
And the last hub-spoke king was then disabled. And this is actually what you also see now with these language models, large language models, ChatGPT and the others. So that we are coming to an end where the data, the end of the data is now, and we have to produce more data to make better predictions. So that's why I'm a little bit more skeptical, because we actually need first the data to have then better artificial intelligence models.
Yeah. That's why companies like Biotech are so important.
Yeah, so one of our main goals is that we actually now do a causal mapping of the entire genome. So it's an annotation first time. And then with the annotated data, we do then machine learning, so predictions. What is the best drug target, for example? What are the novel drug targets? How many drug targets are there in the genome? So these are the basic questions we try to answer. Yeah.
And there's still so much unknown about the genome, isn't there?
It's a good point. But it's changing now. So when we started the company, so the company is now more than 7 years old. Focus was in these days still on functional genetic variants, so what it's called in the exome. But you see now a lot of the rise of dark genome companies. Yep. So we see more and more that genetic variants actually in introns or in non-coding regions are actually much more important and have a much more stronger effect on traits, on diseases, etc. And we are now, I would like to say we still do not understand it, but we have now a chance to use it actually in our models, these data, to get a better understanding.
That's fantastic progress.
I would see.
So tell me a little bit more about where it began. How did you get into a career in science, particularly within drug discovery?
Yeah, this is a long story. So I'm originally a biochemist. So I studied here in Berlin and in Tübingen, and then actually was a little bit intrigued by this idea how we can manipulate the body with small molecules, so with chemistry. So that's why I did a PhD in fragment-based drug discovery. So fragments means that you look at small molecules, look how they bind to the protein, and then a little bit like a puzzle that you then construct based on these smaller, what's called fragments, the real drug molecule.
Okay.
Anyway, so this work in my PhD allowed me then to have a postdoc position at the University of Cambridge. So I spent then more than 3 years in Cambridge, UK. So I still work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, it's an amazing place. So, and then I had my own funding for the last 2 years, the Marie Curie Fellowship, more working in the field of RNA interference. But so my main takeaway from this time is that in biotech pharma, we still do not understand, or we cannot predict clinical efficacy. So a chemist think about the molecule, about the target, but then it's actually jeopardy whether this molecule will have a clinical effect or not. And that's why I heard in the first time in 2013 the idea of what's now called genetic support. So genetic support is that the gene of the drug target is associated in big population studies, so-called genome-wide association study with the disease. And then the general idea is that because it's associated, it's probably more central for the disease, so it makes more sense to target it. And in 2015, there was the big retrospective analysis done by GSK where they really could show it. So when you have genetic support for a target, your drug is much more successful in a phase 2 clinical trial when you test the first time for clinical efficacy.
Yeah.
That's one part. But I mean, how I came to this company. I mean, so after my postdoc, I had the possibility to start my own group here at the university in Germany. But I mean, an academic career, to be honest, it's very unsecure. So it's attached that you actually have to move between different universities if you only have, 3 or 6 year contracts, etc.
Yeah.
And this is actually what I actually dislike. I mean, so I was also interested in joining pharmaceutical industry. Well, it was then after some years after the financial crisis. So probably you can remember 10 years ago or so. Pfizer closed the Sandwich site. A lot of people had to go at GSK and Stephen H. Situation here in continental Europe was not different. And so I applied for several positions and then got rejections because they told me I'm overqualified. I mean,
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, when you apply to a company and they tell you actually you're overqualified for the position, and I don't think that this company has a future.
Yes.
and when I look at the share price of the company now, I'm completely right.
You made the right choices. And I suppose the
people
kind of
can think which company I mean. I cannot tell you, but I guess.
Yeah. And I suppose the market that we're seeing at the moment isn't dissimilar to the market back then. What sort of advice would you give to people if they're coming across the same hurdles?
I think it's different. So, for example, I was there in the beginning of the 2010s. So 2010 to 2013, I was there. And there was these closures in the UK. And I mean, the UK did a fantastic job, in my opinion. So my postdoc advisor, Chris Abel, he was then also here organizing, thinking about, okay, we have shutdowns in big pharma. But what does it mean? It means that there are no drugs developed. I mean, when pharma say, okay, we just fire people in the research department. So that was the beginning of in my opinion, very successful biotech startup companies in the UK. I also see that the investment in the UK, and for example, in the UK Biobank or Genomics England, is, in my opinion, fantastic. So I see now a lot of fruitful collaboration of the biobanks with the startup scene, etc., in the UK. So, in my opinion, it's different. I know that we have now a kind of a pushback after Corona. So in 2021, 2022, actually everything was funded. So, I mean, with an idea, there was a high chance that you get millions of funding. It's not changing, but I mean, it's good. I mean, at some point, you need good solutions, good products in the end.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah.
So, what were the drivers from your career story that you've shared with us? What were the drivers behind making the decisions that you made?
Yeah, first of all, it was I wanted this more secure employment position. Big pharma was not really a choice. Academia was still an offering, but not interesting. So I'm originally from Berlin, and Berlin has a start tech scene. And so then I thought about probably combining biotech and tech, what we now call tech bio. So I moved back to Berlin. I mean, not really an idea what I want to do. Probably was a risk. But I met so many fantastic people who helped me in the end to build up the company. And and now 10 employees, profitable. I mean, today I would like to say nothing was wrong, in the decision, but it was tough and I learned a lot.
Yeah. So you have to be quite comfortable to take risks, which in science, nothing's without risk.
Yeah, I mean to say, it's also when you're straight after your postdoc and you do not have a family, then I think it's okay. You can take the risk. I can understand when people who have, 2 kids or 3 kids, so there's a responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's different. But in general, I mean, I see a lot of shift of, let's say, traditional jobs at big pharma where you just only do science, etc., is now moving more into smaller entities and startups and smaller biotech companies. And then also what you have to, your work is a little bit more broader. It's not just that you work on the science, but you also think about of the business. You think about how you can develop a product, etc. In my opinion, it's good. It's good, but I see a lot of the people are hesitant. I see that, that, for example, chemists after PhD just only want to work in a lab, is not interested in doing also business development, thinking about, and there's still, in my opinion, a kind of a Chinese wall, you can say, with science and business. But I see more and more that it's coming together in the end. And I see that more smarter people starting companies than it was in the last 20, 30 years. So people who had also the chance for an academic career, they say, look, an academic career, it's very unsecure. It's even when you have a professorship, the salary actually ends at a specific level, and you can do actually more. And this is also one thing. Science became cheap in the last years. So, for example, in 10, 20 years ago, when you wanted to do science, actually, you need a huge organization to have the lab equipment, etc. But now you have these collaborators, you have these easy access to biobank data, for example. A lot is more in the software space. So you actually need only a notebook with an access to a cloud computing. So there's a lot of change, and it's good because it put people much more in into the pilot position, the driver's seat, because now it's your creativity, and you can use these more inexpensive tools to create new things, new products, new treatments.
Yeah, and it brings much more innovation at the other end of the funnel.
Yeah.
Well, how important did mentorship play when you're trying to expand your skills in areas like business development and strategic, and thinking of the more commercial element of building a business?
I mean, mentorship, I can highly recommend it, because when you came out of academia, and my parents are also not entrepreneurs, so there's no entrepreneurial spirit for my family, and it's a completely different mindset. So at some point you need the help, but it's just only they can give you an advice, but in the end you have go through the door. I always call it. So it's a different story. I mean, I see a lot of startup projects, young scientists. They ask for an advice. You can give an advice, but I also see, and I don't know what it was 10, 15 years ago when the advice was given to me. Was that so acceptable? I don't know. I cannot remember. But I see when you give advice to people, it's sometimes ignored. So real experience or real knowledge you can only acquire by real experience. I mean, it really has to hurt. It really has to hurt. Then you learn. Yeah.
And so often people talk about the biggest learnings coming from mistakes they've made, or when things haven't gone right.
Yeah. This is actually, my opinion, this is the biggest problem. I mean, in our society, I see it also with my kids. So in school, they are actually trained that mistakes is a bad thing. Mistakes, you should do everything. You should avoid mistakes, and that's why the best is do nothing. You know, this is when you try to avoid mistakes, then the best thing is that you do nothing. And actually, it's vice versa. I mean, also as a chemist, I mean, when you start an experiment, I mean, all my experiments, the first experiments actually never worked. I mean, this is the reality. So you start a new experiment. The first time, it's a chance that it worked. It's actually zero. And it's actually not a good thing that it works in the first place, because then there's no learning, you know? So because when you run an experiment and you see, I don't know, I come from organic chemistry. So actually we need another catalyst. You need another solvent but when you're testing all things out, then you learn how it works. What's the real attitude, you know?
Yeah.
And this is actually what I really miss in our society. That it is, you learn it a little bit in your PhD now. I mean, because in a PhD it's different, but for example, when people hire straight out from a master program, for example, then you really see that they try to avoid mistakes. And then this is a little problematic, because without mistakes, there's no learning. And without learning, there's you don't come to the senior level, to a more experienced level where you can really be better in your job.
Do you think could be done to try and change that attitude? It's
difficult. It's difficult. I mean, as I said, so I see differences with people who have a PhD.
Yeah,
they're a little bit more tolerant for frustration. It's also what I think it's important.
Yeah.
So I saw also companies going down because the founders had very, very simple to say. So they had no PhDs, so they were not used to frustration, and then they said, okay, it's I don't know. I look for a regular job. This CEO thing is not mine.
Yeah.
This is really what I really encourage people to make mistakes.
Yeah. Embrace it. Very important advice. So what would be the one piece of advice you'd give to people who are at early stages in their career at the moment?
Actually, it's the best time ever the best time ever in history now, in my opinion. So when you're well educated, you have a PhD. So when I look back to myself now, actually, you have a PhD. There's a lot of capital. There's a lot of funding out there. And you can do things easily, in my opinion. So 10, 15 years, it was not so easy to set up. I mean, even when you work in chemistry, you need a fully equipped lab. So when I look now here, it's a landscape. So in every town you find now lab space, I mean, collaborators where you can just rent a desk, where you can do your experiments. So, I mean, when I look at Cambridge, so fantastic laboratory places. When I look here in Berlin, setting up this kind of infrastructure. So, I mean, what's called? I mean, the sky is the limit now.
Yeah, take the opportunity. So something else I wanted to talk to you about. I noticed when I was doing my research that you've been writing, and that seems to be another passion of yours.
Yeah, so I wrote a chemical biology book because when I noticed in my PhD that there's a kind of a gap. So everybody is now doing chemical biology, but it's like a little bit more an advertisement. So when you look a little more closer to some professors, it's actually the same what they did 10, 15 years ago, but they call it now chemical biology. But chemical biology, in my opinion, means something completely different. So it means that we have a holistic view on science and drug development. So it is also kind of a shift. I mean, a lot is now, starts in your brain. That's how we think about problems. And in the past, it was so that we had a very reductionistic approach in science. So for example, you can explain biology with chemistry, you can explain chemistry with physics. So you have a big problem, you divide it into smaller problems, and then you actually find a solution for these smaller problems. But this is not the solution for the big problem anymore, you know. So and now in chemical biology, you try to have a better disease understanding, even in a cellular model or in an animal model, for example, and if the biology is better understood, the chance to be successful in a clinical trial is much more higher. And that's why chemical biology, and especially the thinking behind chemical biology, will have a huge impact. And this was for me the reason to write the book, to explain actually also the thinking and to explain it then with examples where they applied the thinking and where we had really, really big success.
Oh, that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing. How do you balance writing a book with being a CSO for such a busy organization?
Yeah, I mean, so the contract started in 2016 and I needed 4 years to write the book.
Yeah.
Most of it I wrote actually in 2020 when I was here at home during Corona.
Yeah.
And again, my biggest mistake was that the mRNA vaccines is not included in the book, and I really have to apologize here. So that's why I have been asked to write now on a second edition, and the mRNA technology is now included. When I wrote the book in summer, I thought mRNA technology will never work. So as I said,
how quickly things can change.
How quickly things can change. Yeah, I mean, mRNA, itself, in my opinion, it does not work. But I mean, the solution was then actually these better formulations. And I'm not a formulation specialist, so I cannot judge on this.
Yeah.
But I was wrong, and then it was really a fantastic job, and I'm now happy to include it in my book, mRNA technology, because I think it's also a nice story about chemical biology. Because the basis, think about the problem, what kind of technique you can apply, and then you can deliver actually in months a new vaccine. It was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that would be really interesting to read the new edition.
Yeah.
Pose, what's next? What's next for Marco? What's next for the business?
So here at Biotech, we now do a lot of this causal inference, and I think causal inference will change actually drug development completely. Yeah. So, for example, synthetic control arms. So in oncology, it's now widely used that you only have single arms, so all patients receive the drug. because in oncology, often there's no standard of care or standard treatment. So in a placebo group means people have to die. It's a death penalty.
Yeah.
So from an ethical point of view, it's not allowed. So you can now test against historic data, but how you compare your data, your single arm now against historic data, you use statistical methods called synthetic control arm. It's huge in my opinion, and we see more and more coming to really actually to simulate clinical trial in advance. We see also with the FDA Drug Modernization Act late from late 22 that these causal inference tools, especially in biobank data, can simulate side effects you never cover in a clinical trial. I mean, in chronic diseases, people take the drug forever. You cannot cover these side effects after let's say you do a clinical trial for a year, you cannot cover it. Long-term adverse effects.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot will change. And we are now, so 20 years ago, we were able to sequence the genome, but now we start with novel statistical methods to understand the genome. We generate now the data to get a better understanding. So this is the biobank data, and UK Biobank, FinGen, all of us in the US. I mean, it's fantastic. And with this data, and together we see, I call it not AI. I know it's a buzzword. I call it more sophisticated statistical methods. And this will have a huge impact for sure. And I call it a silent revolution. So you see the big AI companies, but I see more, I see in clinical research organizations, I see it more in a silent way that these technologies, these methods are applied to make clinical trials better. And I'm actually hopeful. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the R&D productivity will be much better in the upcoming years in pharma.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Marco. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
I wish you all the best for the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.